Welcome back, my friends. If you ever wanted to kill a Cyclops on Nightmare with just 2 arrows, then I have 2 incredible new hunter builds today for you. The first one is a fire build and the second one is a poison build, and we will take a close look if either fire or poison is the best pick for hunter, or if there's almost no difference. We will definitely find out today. We will directly go into the damage values for the fire build, which has a 1.3 million damage with a normal shot on a civilian head during the night. And by the way, it doesn't matter that he was naked, because all civilians have the same stats. It deals between 4 million and up to 5.5 million damage with a devastating shot, mostly depending on your charged state. And it deals between 6 to 6.5 million damage with a predator shot, and around 9 million maximum damage with the now fixed overpower shot, which is the strongest bow shot in the game by version 1.5 now. Then we have the multi-shot, which is between 2 and 3 million. It's always depending on the situation, which value you actually get. Then we have between 3 and 4 million for the Ghost Arrows of Artemis, which is a really nice, really cool ability. Normal assassinations on polymers are absolutely no problem as well. And then we will start with the poison build, which is slightly below 1.3 million for a normal arrow shot. It deals almost the same 5.5 million with a devastating shot. Then it deals also between 6 and 6.5 million with the predator shot. Then for the overpower charged shot we also get around 9 million like we got for the fire build. And here with the multi-shot we also get 2 to 3 million. Here we get a little bit more luck with 3 million. And finally the Ghost Arrows of Artemis, also between 3 and 4 million. Polymers are also no problem with normal assassinations, but for mercenaries I would rather recommend to use a rush assassination with both builds, just to be on the safe side to kill the mercenary safely every time. Since the video is called the 11 million hunter build, you have to poison your enemy, activate battle cry, Chronos, and then use an overpower shot and that poor little enemy. You can get over 11 million damage by doing that, which is just for demonstration of what this build is capable of. You can also do that with the poison build and you will get the same amount of damage, so that is basically the limit of this build. Please be aware that the damage values I have just shown to you do not necessarily reflect which build is better, because I might have just hit the lower end of the damage range with one build and the higher end with the other build. That was just a rough indication of what the builds are capable of and what damage values you can expect when you use them. When it comes down to which elemental type you pick in a hunter build, it is always a decision of which engravings can be put on which pieces. So on the weapons it is easy because every elemental type can be engraved on every weapon, but for the armor pieces it is different. Fire can only be engraved on the helmet and on the boots, while poison can be engraved on the torso and on the belt. That is also the reason why most people think a poison build is better, because you can engrave poison on the torso where are only less good options, and then you can save other spots for a headshot on the helmet, for example. But I found a helmet where you don't have to do it. It makes no difference between poison and fire, and I will show it to you when we go through the items. The headshot damage is a third factor to consider in a hunter build. Always the question, should I go for headshot, should I go for elemental, should I go for fire or poison, because then I can engrave headshot damage somewhere else. And I've come up with a build where this is all solved and it is really straightforward, and it makes fire and poison really comparable for the first time. I'll start the explanation with the fire build. There's no surprises here on the weapon side. We have a perfect sword with hunter damage, critical damage, fire damage and armor penetration. Please do not exchange armor penetration for anything else. Armor penetration is 30% reducing the enemy's armor. So when you have 300% damage and the enemy's armor is reduced by 30%, your damage is in fact multiplied by 1.3. So 300% multiplied with 1.3 is basically another 100% damage on top of it, without the negative effects of losing your health. So armor penetration is a must-have perk for hunter and warrior at all costs. It's even better than the Falx engraving. Then we have another perfect sword with hunter damage, critical damage, fire damage and 100% damage, but health capped to 25%. So if you don't want to use the Falx engraving, or if you want to have some different engraving here inside the build, then that is the spot where you can put it. If you don't like to play with reduced health, then simply replace the 100% damage with 30% all damage, and then you're fine. You keep the complete health bar and you shouldn't die anymore. The Oaken Bow of Chambers is also no surprise. Here we have hunter damage, headshot damage, critical damage, and we will engrave it with 10% critical chance to get to our 100% crit chance build. In case you missed it, the Oaken Bow of Chambers can be found in the Tomb of the Daughters of Atlas in Arcadia, and you can also watch my missable items video to find it. Then we have the Dark Steel Marks. That is a very special item. It is the only headgear in the game that has 100% critical damage while full health on it. And it comes with hunter damage as a primary engraving and also with 10% all damage. So that is a really good, if not the best hunter headgear you can get. Here we engrave it with 20% additional critical chance to get our critical chance to 100%. The Dark Steel Mask can only be obtained from the Oikos store, so you have to purchase a lot of Olympian gifts to get it. I was lucky enough to get it, and I really wanted to share a new hunter build with it, because that makes a big difference here. Then we have some pretty standard bracers here for a hunter build with hunter damage, 100% critical damage while full health, critical chance and another 50% critical damage. The belt is also really basic with hunter damage, critical chance, 100% critical damage while full health, and because we have a fire build, we place 50% headshot damage here on the belt. Having headshot damage here on the belt can even be a better option for a poison build as well, because headshot damage cannot be negated. It just increases your multiplier. You will get the damage no matter what. But when you use fire or poison engravings, then that damage can be covered by resistances. So when you have an enemy with a lot of resistances, like the mythical creatures, or sometimes some normal enemies or even mercenaries tend to have high elemental resistance, you will get less damage when you use a lot of elemental engravings. So when you go for a headshot, you can even get more damage out of your shot consistently versus using more elemental engravings. Even if the mass favors the elemental engravings, headshot damage may be more consistent to get higher values. Then we have the torso with hunter damage, damage with bow charge shot, critical damage and another hunter damage engraving. The damage with bow charge shot is actually behaving like 20% hunter damage, but it requires you to have a fully charged shot to be really at 20%. So when we have 20% damage with bow charge shot here, in fact we don't really lose so much against a poison engraving here. We still have 20% instead of 40% for a poison build. Then we have the boots with 24% hunter damage, 40% fire damage, 100% critical damage while full health and 20% crit chance while full health. And that gives us a total stats of 150% warrior and assassin damage, 328% hunter damage, 265% headshot damage, 40% damage with bow charge shot. We'll have to have a close look on the damage with bow charge shot, because we can compensate the loss of hunter damage here compared to the poison build later on. Then we have 825% critical damage while full health at a 100% chance, and we have 180% fire damage. We also have to remember this value when I show you the poison build now. At the bottom I've added a lot of adrenaline bonuses because I had a lot of points to spare for the hunter build. So when you make an assassination kill, in fact all these bonuses stack together. You will then have 72% adrenaline bonus on an assassination kill, and you will have 82% adrenaline bonus when you do a headshot kill. Because every assassination is a critical and a hit at the same time. So it is an assassination, critical and a hit. That all counts together. And a headshot kill is a headshot and critical hit and a hit. So it's more useful to spread your mastery points and not just increase one value, just spread your points across all of them. Then I will continue to show you the poison build now, which is really similar because also for comparison reasons. We have hunter damage, poison damage, critical damage and armor penetration, and another sword with hunter damage, poison damage, critical damage and 100% damage and health cap to 25%. So basically the same sword, just with poison instead of fire. Again, just a reminder, do not remove the armor penetration, rather remove the 100% damage and health cap to 25%. If you are not familiar with it, or if you want to place something else, stick to the armor penetration. It is almost as powerful, if not more powerful than 100% damage. We use the exact same bow here with the same engravings than in the fire build, and we also keep the dark steel mask. The dark steel mask here in the poison build is even more powerful because we would not be able to engrave poison on the head, so 100% critical damage is a really big deal here for a poison build. Any poison build should have it, it is a must have. Then we have the same gauntlets here with the same engravings, and we also have the same belt here with the same engravings. I do not engrave poison damage here on the belt because I want to compare that build to the fire build, and also when I use headshot damage I have experienced that I get consistently more damage than when I would use elemental. Elemental is blocked by elemental resistance on certain enemies to a huge amount even, and headshot damage cannot be countered. It is just a flat multiplier, it multiplies your damage anyway. However, if you have problems making headshots, I would recommend you to enable full auto aim. It automatically locks your aiming on the enemy's head, especially on Xbox One and PS4. Not sure if it's available on PC, but it really helps a lot when you are having trouble with headshots. And since that's not a competitive game, it really makes Hunter game style easy. I think a lot of people just don't prefer Hunter because it's difficult to hit the enemies, but with enabling auto aim it's really cake style, absolutely easy, and that makes Hunter a lot of fun. On the torso then we have Hunter damage, critical damage, 40% poison damage and another Hunter damage. You can engrave additional Hunter damage on the 4th position when you have fully upgraded your Hunter damage engraving. And then on the boots we have Hunter damage, 100% critical damage while full health, 20% critical chance while full health and another 20% Hunter damage. So basically that's vice versa than in the fire build. We have now poison damage on the torso, and in the other build we had fire damage on the boots. That gives us 150% warrior assassin damage as well, the same as in the fire build, and we have 402% Hunter damage, but only 20% damage with bow charged shot. So these two values negate each other, and the difference is really nil between those two builds. We have the same amount of headshot damage, and then we also have the same amount of critical damage while full health, 825%. So the only difference between these builds is actually the elemental damage. We have had 180% fire damage if you remember correctly, and we have 165% poison damage now. But we have the same amount of poison damage engraving as we had fire damage engraving. So the difference comes from the abilities. From the fire mastery ability you get 40% fire damage bonus, but from the poison mastery you only get 25% poison damage bonus. That is a big difference, and that is actually the only difference between those two builds. We have put everything to be the same except for these basic ability values. And these 15% elemental damage makes a difference between hitting 1.3 million with a normal arrow shot and not hitting 1.3 million with a normal arrow shot. But we also have to look at other factors here. You can actually recollect your poison arrows and put back a big chunk of them into your quiver, while fire arrows simply burn away. And then of course we have the damage over time. There is either a green or a red damage number popping up every second on an enemy when they are fully intoxicated or fully burned. For poison damage, when I remove all my abilities and engravings and mastery points, either 3900 with 25% chance or 1500 with a 75% chance. So all in all, you are rather getting the lower value when you use poison than getting the higher value. When we do the same thing and fully burn an enemy, you will notice that it is always around 5000 damage every time, and there's no lower value. So the point for damage over time goes to fire damage again. So that small weakness for the poison damage over time must have been put into the game, because poison damage is also weakening your enemy. So when your enemy is weakened, you can deal more damage when you additionally hit him. So when we look at the comparison sheet now, we have 382% hunter damage for the fire build, we have 402% hunter damage for the poison build, but then we have 40% damage with bow charge shot, but only 20% on the poison build. The headshot value is the same, the critical damage is the same, and then we have the 15% difference on the elemental part. And that is the only difference here in these two builds. So which one is really better? Well, according to the numbers, fire has a slight lead here of 15% fire damage from the abilities. But then again, we have the poison weakening, we have the armor weakening, and poison has also its use. And it can also be better for players because they don't want to get burned, for example. So I think it's more like a personal preference. Some people prefer just poison over fire, and it's fine. And I also like to play with poison, and it's really situational, also depending on your enemies. So last but not least, I will show you the abilities. For a hunter build, it is mandatory to get Sixth Sense. It multiplies your hunter damage by 200%, and it also locks down your aiming on the next target, which is really helpful. Arrow Master is useful when you don't have the fire or poison engraving on your bow, so that you can craft poison and use poison or fire arrows. Multi-shot is kind of a double-sided sword. It's a kind of weak ability, but you can kill multiple enemies, and if your hunter damage is very high, you can get rid of many enemies really fast. The Devastating Shot is probably the best hunter shot you can use. It costs only 1 adrenaline, deals a really big amount of damage, and is easy to use. So the text here is a bit misleading. It says 400%. 400% is in fact the maximum damage you can get. If you have not fully charged your bow, it will be 200%. If you have fully charged it, it will be 400%. Some people think it might be 800%, but that's not correct. The maximum damage for the Devastating Shot is only 400%. And this makes also the Predator shot with 600% a lot stronger than the Devastating Shot, but it is more complicated to use. You have to navigate the arrow to your target, and it really takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience. It is dealing more damage, but more difficult, especially for beginners. Archery Master is of course a passive ability, increases your hunter damage by 40% and also refills your first adrenaline segment, really useful. Then the Overpower Bow Strike, this time with version 151. It is finally fixed, so we can deal insane amounts of damage, like over 9 million damage, which I have shown to you. You can simply blow away all your mercenaries or a whole leader group in a single shot, which is really awesome. Then we have the Ghost Arrows of Artemis, in my opinion a really good ability because you can save one more engraving. You don't have to go for arrow pierce shields, you can simply use ghost arrows, they will also pierce shields and walls for you. So this is a hunter build, but we still have to go for a couple of warrior abilities here. First of all, Weapons Master. Weapons Master is increasing your crit chance by 10%, not only for the melee weapons but also for the bow. So you have to go here with 3 points on Weapons Master, no matter what build you use. Then here on Gear Master, it increases your armor by 90% and reduces the chance by range damage for 10%, which is also good for a hunter, so never miss this one. Flaming attacks, here you have to go for 1 point to unlock the fire mastery. So in case you make a fire build, you copy my fire build, you have to invest 1 point on flaming to unlock the fire mastery, which gives you 40% additional fire damage. The rest of the warrior abilities are rather optional, so it's your personal preference if you have enough points to use them. Overpower attacks can be good if you want to go melee at a certain point. It also unlocks the Battle Cry of Ares, which is increasing your damage and also the hunter damage. Fury of the Bloodline, quickly refill your adrenaline bars if you have not the time or if you have missed some assassinations, you can just use Fury. Ring of Chaos, not so strong this time here in this build. Second Wind, refilling your energy is probably a must-have. Then Battle Cry of Ares, you can use it when you want to kill the Cyclopses with 2 hits, otherwise you don't really need it, you have enough damage anyway. Then we also have to go for some assassin abilities. Even if it is a hunter build, they are increasing our base values. First of all, here Shadow Assassin is increasing our critical damage by 50%, so you have to go for it. It is useful for any kind of builds here to go and invest in Shadow Assassin. Even if it's here in the assassin tree, it doesn't matter, you have to go for it. Then Rush Assassination, really needed to get the mercenaries killed with an assassination, because a normal assassination is quite not always killing the mercenary here, and that's also the reason why we have to go for 1 point on critical assassination to make sure that we can kill the mercenaries. Stealth Master is increasing your damage during the night by around 10% if you have not been spotted yet, and that is also the reason why I clipped all the damage values at the beginning during the night, because they are 10% higher when doing so. The Chronos Time Warp is optional in my opinion. It was very useful when we had version 1.2, version 1.3 during the summer to get to the highest possible damage values, but now with the fixed overpower bow strike it's really not so useful anymore. Then the Vanish ability here, it is useful when you want to really intoxicate your enemies and getting the most damage, the highest damage number. Otherwise it's not really useful. I think you can just one hit everything and that's enough in my opinion. So you are better off saving your points and investing it somewhere else. On top of that, you will also have to engrave the Vanish Intoxicate enemies engraving on your torso, which is also not the best option, so you'll lose more damage by doing that, so I really do not recommend it. If you want to make the poison build, then you have to go for venomous attacks for 1 point, which unlocks the poison mastery. The poison mastery gives you 25% additional poison damage, so really useful for just 3 points. The fire mastery instead has 40% damage increase, so if you want to make the poison build, you only have to go for the poison abilities here. If you want to make the fire build, you only have to go for the fire abilities. I was just using both because I was lazy reassigning everything during my tests. So then finally we will take a quick look at the mastery points here. We go for hunter damage of course, then crit chance, crit damage, headshot damage, damage with bow charge shot. All these I have maxed out. Then not so important ones are bow charging speed and damage with bows on distant target, because that is already 25 to 30 meters, which is really far, so you will likely not use it every time, so it's rather optional here. Then I have also invested 12 points on adrenaline on headshot, because all adrenaline stack on top of each other and it's not necessary to go for the maximum 20 points on each of them. In the warrior tab we only need armor penetration and fire damage. If you want the poison build, then of course you can leave out the fire damage here, but armor penetration is really useful. Always go for the maximum, either 9% or 10% armor penetration. Then on the assassin tab we have 20 points here on poison weakening effect, and that is obviously only needed when you have the poison build and when you really want to intoxicate your enemies. So you can save 20 more points if you don't want to use the vanish ability. So all that is really situational. You can save all these points. Damage with swords also optional. You don't have to go for it in a hunter build, so just leave it out. I've just put it here because I had a lot of points here. But then mandatory crit chance, crit damage, then damage while full health, really needed. If you want to go for a poison build, then here is the poison damage increase 20%, and here's also the adrenaline. I've spread 8 points here, but they will give me a lot of adrenaline bonuses even if I spend only 8 points on each of them. And then optional again, here we have the damage on elites and bosses. Now we are already at the end of the video. I hope you really enjoyed it. This was a long one, I'm sorry for that, but there was a really lot of stuff to show, especially for the poison and fire comparison. A lot of people have asked about it in the past, and I hope I've cleared up every questions here. If you still have any questions regarding poison or fire, please write a comment, please subscribe, and see you next time.